We'll be talking about how North American retailers and brands can increase sales to online shoppers around the world, and that kind of cross-border e-commerce is increasing rapidly, as you'll soon see. Our speakers will be Scott LaPointe, Director of Information Technology at Planet Shoes, an online retailer of feel-good footwear, and he can tell you more about why shoppers feel good when they buy shoes from Planet Shoes. He'll be joined by Craig Reed, Vice President of Global E-commerce at Pitney Bowes, the sponsor of today's webinar. After they speak, we'll take your questions. You can ask questions at any time using the message box on your screen, and we'll take them at the end. And by early next week, you will each receive an email explaining how you can get a copy of the slides you see today. Before Craig begins, I want to set the stage by telling you a little bit about how big global e-commerce is, how fast it's growing, and some of the key trends we're following at Internet Retailer. For starters, it's worth pointing out that online retailer is growing steadily around the world. eMarketer projects global online sales will grow over the next few years at 17% a year, a lot faster than global economic growth, which is 3.7% this year. And e-commerce is roughly 8% of total retail sales worldwide and inching up each year. E-commerce growth is particularly strong in the Asia-Pacific region, which now generates more online retail sales each year than North America or Europe. And a big reason for that is the explosive growth of e-commerce in China. As you can see on the next slide, next slide, please. We're still behind. Okay, here we go. Online retail sales in China exceeded those of the United States in 2013 for the first time, and China is growing far faster than the United States. That extremely fast growth in China is a big reason why eMarketer projects online sales will grow so fast in Asia Pacific, far faster than any other region. Next slide, please. But the web is growing in all regions. It's particularly worth noting Europe because it's been in a deep economic slump that still afflicts much of the continent. Total retail sales in the European Union increased less than 1% last year, but online sales of the top 500 retailers in Europe, by our estimate, increased 17%. So even in Europe, the web is steadily taking market share away from bricks and mortar stores. And there's still room for growth. For the simple reason a lot of people in the world still don't use the Internet. While Internet penetration is almost 80% in North America and over 60% in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, it's below 50% in the rest of the world. We know from experience that as consumers go online, they test out buying from web retailers and gradually get more comfortable with it and buy more and more. So that is still ahead for many consumers in much of the developing world. I want to give just one example of how explosive this growth can be and how it can quickly translate to a lot of online sales. Akamai's content delivery network spans the globe and handles a big chunk of Internet traffic, estimates each year the number of IP addresses in each country. That grew the fastest last year in Brazil and grew by a lot. Number of IP addresses in Brazil grew 47%. China and the U.S. tied for second at 15%. Now, the number of IP addresses refers to the number of devices accessing the Internet, not the number of people. So why did Brazil grow so fast? As it happens, I traveled to an e-commerce show in Brazil in May, shortly after Akamai issued this report, and asked what accounted for this growth. I was told there had been a big expansion in broadband Internet access and that the government had reduced the onerous tariffs on buying smartphones from abroad. That, I was told, led to consumers going online and buying a lot of smartphones, sometimes for as little as $50 from companies like Alibaba's AliExpress. I didn't realize you could buy a smartphone for $50, but indeed you can, and you can get many items at low prices on AliExpress, an e-commerce site that Alibaba introduced a couple of years ago to let consumers around the world shop directly from Chinese manufacturers and retailers. There are 2 points here. First, the number of online shoppers can grow very quickly in emerging markets as they get technology that we've grown accustomed to, like broadband, Internet, and smartphones. The second is that online shoppers in these countries aren't going to wait for you to decide to sell to them. They'll find other online retailers from other countries that are happy to have them as customers, including aggressive, well-funded companies like Alibaba. So if you put off global expansion, you may find that when you get around to it, these consumers have developed loyalty to other brands. It's also important to note that consumers all over the world, not just in Brazil, are snapping up smartphones as fast as they can. For many shoppers, the smartphone is the first device they will own that connects them to the Internet. and that's especially true in emerging markets such as Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And these consumers are shopping on smartphones and tablets and more each year. It's important to note, however, that tablets, which are more expensive than smartphones, have not yet caught on as quickly in less developed regions. In a recent survey by Rakuten, 12% of consumers in the United Kingdom and 11% in the United States cited tablets as their favorite device for shopping online. That compares to only 0.7% in Brazil. So that's something to look forward to, particularly as more affordable tablet computers become widely available. You'll likely see more consumers using them to shop. And that's starting to happen in Brazil, but tablet shopping is not nearly as prevalent as it is in the United States. This is taken from a report on e-commerce in Brazil issued just this week by Forrester Research. As you can see, 6% of online sales in Brazil are from smartphones, not far behind the 9% in the United States. But in the U.S., 21% of online sales come from tablets, compared with only 7% in Brazil. But cheaper tablets are coming to market all the time, and smartphone screens are getting to be nearly as big as tablet screens. So we can expect we'll see plenty more shopping all over the world from mobile devices of one type or another. And North American retailers are seeing this global opportunity and moving on it. Here's a look at some of the major markets where Internet retailer top 500 retailers ship internationally. This is an area growing steadily as more services emerge that make it relatively easy for North American retailers to sell and ship to online shoppers in other countries. For example, nearly 200 top 500 retailers ship to China and Brazil, two fast-growing markets. Looking at these major markets, on average, 7% more top 500 retailers sold to consumers in those countries in 2013 than in 2012, and we expect that will continue to increase. The question for North American retailers is how to reach the growing number of online shoppers around the world, and that's what our speakers will address today. You'll be hearing first from Craig Reed, Vice President of Global E-Commerce at Pitney Bowes, and then Scott LaPointe, Director of Information Technology at online retailer Planet Shoes, who will describe his company's experience with selling internationally via the web. After they speak, we'll take your questions. Again, you can ask questions at any time. We'll take them at the end. And remember, you will get an email in the next couple of days giving instructions on how you can get a copy of today's slides. With that, I will turn the mic over to Craig Reed of Pitney Bowes.
Thanks, Don, and hello, everyone. I'm, as Don said, Craig Reed, Vice President of Global E-Commerce for Pitney Bowes. By way of introduction, I've actually been in the cross-border e-commerce space for 14 years, believe it or not. So I've seen a lot, and what I can tell you is that there's never been a more exciting time in cross-border e-commerce. There's never been a better time to go global, and just the amount of growth and development we've seen in the market's been just been tremendous over, especially the past 3 to 4 years. So let's go into some of that. First, from an agenda standpoint, I want to go through. We went through some of the, or Don went through some of the market size information. We'll drill down into that a little bit more, into some of the relevant markets, talk a bit about the dynamics going on within some of those markets. And then we'll also talk about what we believe to be some of the key elements of a good cross-border experience that you would want to offer your customers. And then finally, I'll turn it over to Scott to talk about how Planet Shoes applied that learning and is driving experience in their web store. So Don went through this, but really from a buyer perspective, there are just a ton of buyers out there that are spending a lot on e-commerce purchasers globally, and also with all of the growth in B2C e-commerce sales globally, a lot of that's being driven by developing markets, as Don mentioned. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but what's interesting is that even with all of the purchasing power outside of the U.S., there's still, really only 50% of U.S. online merchants are doing business cross-border. So there's a lot of international customers out there that are not being addressed by retailers, and that presents a huge opportunity. Get to the next slide here. Someone could advance the slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So the good news is the U.S. is the favorite destination for global shoppers, not surprisingly because of the supply. So really when you look at stack ranking here, it's not really surprising because a lot of the supply resides in the U.S., the UK, and China. So that's really what's driving this chart. Also, within the U.S., a lot of large brands. Obviously, the same applies for the UK, where there's reasons why global buyers that have disposable income want to go to U.S. shops, they want to go to UK shops, and they want to get access to goods. Traditionally, I referenced the fact that I've been in the cross-border e-commerce space a long time. When we first started doing business, it was really Canada was it. If you ship to Canada, that was pretty much all you needed to do. And as the market developed, that changed a bit, and it became the English language nexus of Canada, the UK, and Australia. And if you dig into those markets a little bit, you can see with the different segmentation that roughly half of the people in Canada are shopping from U.S. websites, but that still leaves half of the people who are not, which may be partially due to a supply constraint. Remember, the 50% of stores that aren't selling internationally, aren't selling to Canada. So there's opportunity there within the 9.1 million that aren't shopping. Similarly, in the UK, larger market, 11.1 million who are shopping within the U.S. now, but also a larger market part of the market that are not shopping cross-border or within the U.S. One of the dynamics there, if you look at the UK, Canada, and Australia, Canada and Australia look a lot alike, and that's because the supply within the local markets of Canada and Australia are relatively constrained compared to the UK. So it stands to reason that UK consumers would be able to find more of what they want locally given the supply. However, if you look at the pure numbers, there's still 11.1 million people, the biggest number on the slide, compared to Canada and Australia, who are buying from U.S. web stores. So that presents a big opportunity. When you go to developing markets, and one of the things that I've seen over especially the last few years, is the growth of other markets apart from the English language nexus, in the importance of those markets as a potential opportunity for your business. So, if you add up the yellow bars on the previous slide and you add up the yellow bars on this slide, it's actually higher. And we're not even including Russia and some of the other large developing markets that are giving exposure to a lot of new demand. So you look at countries like Brazil. Even though only 4.2 million buyers are shopping cross-border, that's still a large number relative to a country like Australia. Germany, the same story. And then you look at China, as a percentage, relatively low number of buyers buying from U.S. websites, but it's still 15.1 million, which is the largest number out of all the countries. So the message here is that traditionally getting to Canada, Australia, and the UK was enough. You were getting most of the global demand. But as these markets have developed, you are not reaching your full potential if you aren't considering markets like Brazil, Germany, China, Russia, etc. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. And not surprisingly, along with all of this opportunity comes a lot of complexity. So sending something, pricing something into Canada is a heck of a lot different than doing it into Brazil or China. There's a lot of other things you need to consider. So along with the opportunity comes complexity. So that's kind of where I want to dig into how you would want to go global and what the roadmap would be. And just keep that underpinning of complexity in your minds, because that's really important. There's a huge opportunity, but along with that opportunity is complexity that needs to be solved. First of all, as I mentioned, you want to look at demand for your products across different international markets. So you could choose as a retailer, you could say, hey, I think that my products are really going to work well in Canada. I think they're really going to work well in the UK, and you could sort of focus efforts on that. We believe a better solution is to look at opportunities where you can get large numbers of markets in a in a single go, a single integration. So there's different ways you can do that we'll talk about, but really you want to be able to get access to as much international demand as you can within a single international deployment effort. So that's step one. Step two is that I often suggest to retailers that are looking at this is to test the waters using some low-risk, low-cost options. So eBay is a good example of that, where you can list items on eBay. The global shipping program, which we actually power for eBay, gives you access to 64 countries globally within eBay. So you could choose to list some items on eBay, test the international market, see where there's demand, where you might want to focus efforts. That's another alternative that I've seen folks pursue. And then finally, really ensuring that you're providing a good experience. So it really boils down to a few things. That you need to be making sure that you have cost certainty for your buyers. You need to make sure that you're actually allowed to sell those goods into the country of destination that you're looking at. You need to provide reasonable costs. Tracking information should be there. You should have a return solution for them. So there are some core elements of a good experience for the buyer that need to be considered across all these markets. And then obviously along with that, as I mentioned, comes a lot of complexity to solve the problems that underpin giving that good experience. So from a platform standpoint, and I'm using an illustration of ours, but there are other ones out there, and really this is how we solve the complexity problem. The first step is really product classification. So if you want to ship something internationally, you need to classify it. And once you have that classification, you can then understand, well, I know it's one of these things, so I can either ship it out of the country or I can't ship it out of the country. So the first thing that needs to be considered is export compliance. Secondly, if I can ship it, there may be some hazmat or dangerous good restrictions that apply to those types of products or not, depending on your catalog. And then finally, there's import restrictions into the country of destination that you need to be aware of. So all of that complexity around prohibited goods is something that needs to be considered in going global, making sure that your products can actually be sold in the country of destination. They can be exported from the U.S. Finally, assuming that you can sell them internationally and that there are no restrictions, it's important to have a cost calculation that allows you to understand what your duty or tax implications are going to be, or what the buyer's duty tax implications are going to be for that shipment, what the transportation costs are going to be, and then obviously trying to make sure that those are reasonable within the context of the transaction. And these are easily said but difficult to do, because managing duties and taxes, managing certainty around duties and taxes, managing certainty around transportation costs can be quite difficult, which is what the second part of the slide is about, the cross-border transportation platform, where at least within our system, we manage the transportation layer, and we take those inbound domestic goods. So if you're trying to ship internationally, you ship it locally to us, to a facility. We'll take those goods and we'll convert them from domestic inbound packages to international outbound packages, make sure that the carrier routing is there. We'll add parcel protection to it, and we'll also integrate fully across the supply chain tracking. So because we do that, and because we work with customs and we lock in all of the customs rates, we're able to offer a guaranteed landed cost solution, and we're able to offer restriction screening, etc. But really, the illustration here is to show you what needs to happen essentially to provide a good experience underneath the covers. What kind of complexity you'd need to deal with if you chose to do it yourself, or I obviously believe pretty strongly that handing it over to a third party who's experienced in these matters is the way to go. So the keys to success, I mean, it's really kind of mastering the basics, and then as you master the basics, increasing your sophistication along the way. So the first thing you want to make sure you have is cost certainty. So we talked about that in the previous slide and the ways that you would need to provide cost certainty. Buyers don't want to have COD fees. They want to know how much they're going to pay. Secondly, shipping costs obviously have to be reasonable, and you can choose to put the cost burden on the buyer, or you as a retailer can make an effort to make it simpler for the customer, make the shipping costs more reasonable for the customer, and then finally a clear returns policy. And actually, interestingly, we talked to a lot of retailers about returns, and while you need to have a returns policy, the interesting thing is that international returns as a percentage of sales is often much, much lower, and in fact often orders of magnitude lower than domestic returns. However, you still need to be clear about your returns policy. The other thing on returns that I think you need to think about is options for returns. So it may not make sense, depending on your SKU mix, to send something back from Australia or from the UK. You may want to locally liquidate that. You may want to destroy it if it's a really low value good, or you may want to donate it. There's a few options that we try to present that follow along with what the SKU mix might look like or what the value of the good might look like. So that's something to keep in mind. As you kind of go down the road and continue to develop your international business, initially you could offer something as simple as PayPal, which protects you from fraud, allows you to take payments internationally. Then you may want to reach out to some of the payment service providers out there who are providing local payment processing, currency conversion, fraud management, etc., and then look at ways to localize your site for in-language, local language capabilities. The thing to consider, though, when you go down those roads is the more you localize your site and make it speak to a domestic customer, that's a good thing from a conversion standpoint. However, it brings along with it implications around customer service and other things that you've set an expectation that you're talking to them in that language. So you need to make sure that all your email templates and your other communication vehicles follow suit. So that's often why we see a lot of U.S. retailers see success without going all the way to a fully localized site. They master the basics, as I said, and they still get a good chunk of the returns. However, there are options to continue to get more sophisticated. So this is an example of what it could look like in a checkout where it's going to a buyer in Germany. They see their merchandise total. They understand exactly how much they're paying in shipping, what their duty and taxes and customs implications are, so that's a guaranteed cost at checkout. I'll also add that there's options here. So depending on what your margin profiles look like, if you have margin room, building some of these costs into the price of the product up front is something that can be done. I've seen be done successfully. So there's ways also to offer some of these costs in different parts of the buying experience. So you could embed, let's say, duties into the product price. You could show that on the product page when they come in the door, and they don't see duties and taxes. At the end of the buying cycle, they see shipping costs only. So I've seen a bunch of different flavors of how folks choose to present these costs, which can have a good impact on conversion, again, depending on your margin profile. So as I mentioned, displaying local currency, going all the way to a fully localized site, I don't think typically makes sense for everyone. However, showing local currency often does, where, and again, this could be through your own payment service provider, it could be through someone like PayPal, but we do see a lift in conversion when we see the local currency displayed. So with that kind of backdrop in terms of what needs to happen, how it works, what the basic buying experiences are, I'm going to turn it over to Scott now to give you some background on how Planet Shoes saw the opportunity and how they've rolled out their international service.
Thank you, Craig. This is Scott Lapointe. Director of IT at planetshoes.com, and first I'll start off by kind of telling you what we do and what our challenges were before we partnered up with Pitney Bowes. We're an online retailer that sells shoes, handbags, and accessories, mostly for the healthy and wellness type shoes in some fashion area. And for about 10 years we were selling to the US and Canada. And as our sales increased, we started to see more and more issues with selling to Canada. You know, we offer a flat rate shipping because it's easier for the customer, instead of trying to give them the zip code up front, trying to figure out what the shipping is. We've always offered a flat rate shipping fee. And with Canada, you know, some of the farther destinations, we were seeing that we were, you know, losing money on the shipping fee. What we ended up seeing also is we had an increase of abandoned orders, customers refusing it because they didn't realize, no matter how well we communicated with them, that they owed a fee at the time of delivery. That because we were using UPS International, and the duty and tax would be collected when the packages arrived at the customer's door. What ended up happening a lot of times is they would refuse it. The cost to bring it back to the U.S. was so high, we just ended up abandoning the orders. So the next step we ended up doing was we ended up putting every Canadian order on hold, contacting each customer and verifying that they accept that they will have a COD charge when the packages came. So that involved delaying the order, customer service, contacting every single customer before it's been released, and it just created bottlenecks as well as an increased cost in handling Canadian orders. And what we started to see is a lot of negative feedback on social media and our site surveys. So we were at a crossroads at that point in time, either basically stop selling to Canada or find a better option. And we ended up looking at a couple different solutions, and we found that what we liked about the Pitney Bowes solution was that we could integrate it right into our site. Basically, it's a bunch of API calls that allows us to customize and present to the customer the way we want the message to be displayed to them. And you know, again, with that, it was easy to integrate with our custom site. They had a centrally located shipping hub, which is basically in the middle of the country, so no matter where we put our warehouse, we could control our shipping costs. What we ended up doing before 2012, we decided to implement it and just use it for Canada only. So what we did is, again, a couple of things that you have to be aware of is information that you need on your SKUs before you go into this. Country of origin is a very big information that you need to be able to record in your system, because that's used heavily to figure out duties and tax and also shipping restrictions. And it's a simple interface. Basically, we give Pitney Bowes a list of our SKUs with all the information that's needed so that they can figure out the harmonizing codes and everything to be able to export out of the U.S. Then we integrate it into our website, the shipping quote, and then once the order is confirmed, we communicate back to Pitney Bowes that an order is expected, and then when we ship it out of our warehouse, we send a shipment confirmation so that they know that it's coming, and the tracking number that it's coming on, so that they can handle it easy on their end. That's basically through the integration that we had. We brought that live for Canada in 2012, and basically, let me go to the next slide. Oops, sorry. Our conversion rate's almost doubled. Canadian traffic has doubled. basically Canada has not become an issue anymore. Fewer customer complaints. One of the things we were always worried about was, will our sales go down for Canada because they see a higher cost? And the reverse has happened, is that they see total transparency, so they are more likely to purchase from us. We haven't had anybody reject a delivery anymore. None of the packages, orders go on hold. Customer service has basically decreased the overhead for them to handle Canadian customers. After running that for a while, kind of getting it down, like again, starting slow, learning as we go on how to deal with, then we decided to open it up to additional countries. A couple of things that we did in 2013 to get ready for that is we added on some fraud controls, made sure that our credit card processors could handle international cards. So 2013 we geared up to be able to expand into other countries. February we added 10 countries, and as of this August we have 60 total countries that we now ship to. What we found that key learning. What we found is that hold on, I'm just sorry, I got lost a second. I just want to go back to the slide. There we go. So what we found was that Australia was actually a big customer of ours, and when as we I jumped back. There we go. Australia was a big customer of ours because there's no duty on shoes. We kind of found that out by accident as we started seeing sales for Australia increase. We started investigating why, and we found that there was because there's no duty, that we found word of mouth in Australia traveled fast. We found actually a website posted on blogs in Australia, and that's why we decided to, from there, look at other countries that maybe had an opportunity like that to increase marketing. And I actually skipped a slide, I'm sorry. A couple of things that we learned was that merchandising needed to make sure that they added the right data needed in order to ship international, countries of origin mostly, but also some of the things we found is that some of the items had export restrictions. Just last week we had a shoe with rabbit fur in it, and that was restricted to ship to some countries. So those are the things that you learn as you go along. Marketing, right now we're marketing to the top 20 countries that we sell to, and we're starting to learn how to market to each country. Customer service, you have to prepare your customer service for the inquiries. You're going to now get emails, chats, phone calls from people from all these different countries. Make sure that your customer service policies are well documented and they're prepared for these additional inquiries. One of the biggest things is returns. We found that our returns for international customers are very low, single-digit return rates. But we also have to have a policy in place that if they've got the wrong product or defect, a lot of times your shoes has a defect, we need to make sure that we can get that customer the correct product when it's our fault. If they bought it, they didn't like it, they need to work with them to arrange the returns, but if it's our fault, we need to make sure we have a proper policy. One of the things that has worked out very well when customers call about returns, in order to get them maybe to keep it and not have to go through the return, if it's a slight defect, color variation on the product, we offer them additional discounts in order to keep the product versus returning it, and that's worked very well for us, and that allows us to not have to ship out another product to them, arrange to get the defective product back, or how to handle that. So that was something that our customer service department kind of worked out as they went through the getting the return requests. One of the big things for us is a lot of our vendors have distribution agreements in different countries. With that, as a U.S. retailer, we are restricted to ship certain products to certain countries. These, I think, are very archaic type rules that they've had in there, and they're not really understanding the impact of global e-commerce. With that, though, we've had to build processes around to be able to not be able to display and ship product to different countries. One of the worst things that happens is a customer from a company sees a great product, puts it in the cart, and then all of a sudden they say, sorry, we can't ship it to you. And that's kind of what we have to do now, is we try to figure out how to build a process around not showing them product that we can't ship to them. But also we're trying to educate our vendors into understanding this global economy, and trying to get them to allow anyone to ship anywhere in the country, in the world. And that's one of the challenges we have in our industry. And also with drop shipping, drop shipping, a lot of e-commerce retailers do that, where they have part of their product showing on the site that they buy from the vendor as you have a sale. And just understanding how that will affect your international business, you need to account for that. And making sure that you're handling it and not creating delays in handling the drop ship, because there's already a delay in shipping international. You want to make sure you decrease the window, but handling a drop ship also. Again, Australia was a huge surprise to us as far as the sales. We found that because we put in proper fraud controls, we've had a very, very limited number of international fraud orders that get through. We catch, first of all, we felt that maybe there was going to be a huge increase in fraud orders and it would not be worth it to manage it. The number of fraud orders have been very low, and because of the tools that we have, we haven't been impacted by fraud at all. We have less impact on fraud internationally than we do domestically. Where we are now, like I said, we've identified our top 20 countries we want to continue to target and increase our marketing efforts. Through 2014, as we started adding more countries, we've seen the traffic double over time for each of those countries. So we're tracking traffic by country, sales by country. And we found that as we add these countries on over the couple months after that, we find that the traffic is increasing. A lot of the times it's increasing because we're making sure we're getting indexed in the local search engine markets, but we also find that the word of mouth has helped increase traffic from those countries. Out of the 60 countries, we actually have sales in 44 countries. It's about 3.5% of our total revenue right now. Next year, our goal is to increase to about 10% of total revenue, because we added the countries in August. We feel that with our marketing efforts, we can increase, and that's our company goal, is to have 10% of our total revenue from international markets. Customer service, these are the types of inquiries we're getting for our customer service for international customers. Order tracking, a lot of that has to do with our dropship model. It's not necessarily that the tracking through the Pitney Bowes interface, but tracking where the order is. A lot of times the order is just delayed through the dropship process, and trying to figure out internally how we can increase that and increase visibility. Price verification. A lot of Canadian customers are calling and saying, is this really the price? Because they're so used to getting blindsided by COD. A lot of U.S. retailers will ship to Canada using UPS or FedEx International shipping, and they expect a COD charge for the duty and tax. So a lot of that is just making sure this is everything. I'm not owed anything. I don't have to pay anything when I get it delivered. So that's what we've seen at inquiries on there. And again, the returns, again, how do we handle defective or wrong product in the box type returns, because that is technically our mistake, and we need to make sure that we offer them a replacement at our cost, versus if they just didn't like it, we help arrange to ship it back. Again, missing orders, we have just as many, we have a higher percent domestically of missing order research than we do international. And order and address corrections. Customer sometimes has buyer remorse, or after they've shopped, they figure they want another shoe versus the other shoe, so they try to call and get the order changed, or they realize they put their address in wrong. Those are the types of inquiries we're getting from international customers, and a lot of it is the same type of inquiries we're getting from domestic customers also. Now that we've got the system live, we've tweaked everything out, we've mastered the basics. 2015 is where we're going to increase our sophistication. Again, trying to build processes around vendor requirement compliance. That's one of our biggest challenges, is what product can ship to what countries. We're in an industry that has a lot of restrictions. Other industries don't have as many restrictions as we do. But that is something that right now we aren't managing as efficiently as possible. Multilingual content. We have some content in Spanish. We find that we need a better way to manage multilingual content. And what languages should we handle? How should we handle it? Those are the things we're struggling with on what to do. We're looking at the sales in different markets and figuring out, based on that, should we go and try to put more content in this language versus this language, and then using translation services to assist in translating basic content. We add hundreds and hundreds of new items every month, and getting the descriptions of that product translated in a timely manner. Local currency support, and looking at outside services to help accurately display the conversion rate and the currency for that location, as well as one of the big things we noticed, that some countries, when you try to do product feeds into like Google Shopping in Germany, you need to feed the Google Shopping in the local currency. So those are some of the things that we found as we continue to try to market in different countries, that we have to then build some more sophistication. One of the other things is, again, what we as we're continuing to learn this stuff, we want to continue to make our website easier to understand and easier for the international customer to be able to look at their order history and the tracking. We found that that's one area that I think we need better visibility in, and just using the tools that are available to us to make it a little bit easier so that they don't have to contact customer service as much. And overall, as far as what we found, that the implementation was very easy for us, and we found that the challenges are always going to be in-house. When do you do what, and how much involvement you have to get into different pieces to accomplish it. But we've had, like I said, great success when we put Canada on, and we're very excited to continue to market in some of these international markets, and we are continually surprised at what we learn as we continue to market into these different countries. And the marketing department, they're actually now doing specific emails to registered customers in the different countries. So we're really starting to try to understand how to locally advertise in different markets, because we find that some of these markets, certain products sell better, and that's some of the things that the merchandising department is studying, and we're making different purchases based on some of that, and then the marketing department is reacting and marketing to those countries based on certain products. And we're continuing to learn every day how to sell internationally better. I think that's it for me. I think now we'll hand it over back to Don.
Okay, thanks, Scott. You certainly proved Craig's point that it is complex, but it's impressive what you've been able to accomplish. Okay, we're going to move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. There's still time to ask any questions. And remember that you will be getting an email in a day or two explaining how to get a copy of the slides. So let us go to questions. First question, do I need to change my internal shipping processes a lot to ship internationally? For example, buy new software to calculate taxes and shipping. Craig, do you want to start with that and maybe pass it on to Scott?
Yeah, sure. The shorter answer is no. And the way I would characterize it is that selling internationally really, from our perspective, should be as easy as selling domestically. So all you really need to do is be able to ship to a domestic U.S. address, and from there we take care of the rest of the journey. And you know, that's been a pretty successful model for us. So I'll throw it over to Scott, and you can either confirm or deny my
Actually, the warehouse loved it when I went to Pitney Bowes, because before we were shipping Canada, and they had to do extra steps for every Canadian order. After we moved to Pitney Bowes, as Craig said, it's just a domestic address, so everything came down as a UPS ground package. So in essence, what the warehouse had to do was actually less, and so they just treat it just like as any other domestic package. And one thing we found, that our volume is getting to a point now where I'm actually going to be working with the warehouse to build a system in that we're going to try to reduce costs by shipping an LTL pallet every day to the location instead of each individual package as a UPS package, because our volume is high enough now we can actually get cheaper rates.
Yeah, that's a great point, Scott. In fact, we've seen that happen with, as volumes climb, the domestic journey can be consolidated, and you can get it down to, instead of dollars, it's cents. And that reduces the overall cost of the customer and obviously increases conversion. So that's a great step.
Okay, next question. How long does it take to integrate international shipping processes into existing domestic e-commerce shipping processes?
Yeah, that's. I mean, the system for us is pretty simple. So it can be used in different ways, but in its most simple features, there's a few API calls that happen through checkout that you submit some, in the simplest form, submit information to us on what's in the cart and where it's going, and we'll return all the costs associated with it, the delivery time, etc., any restrictions that might apply if we haven't pre-screened the catalog, which is usually recommended. And then, assuming the buyer presses the go button, there's a confirm order handshake, and that's about it. It's not that complex, and we've seen retailers be able to integrate it into their site in a pretty short amount of time. So, Scott, was your experience consistent with that, I think?
Yeah, basically the first step we did was we built a batch process that we sent our catalog, because we felt getting the catalog there, like you said, is the most important first step. And so we just have a job that runs and feeds the catalog to the Pitney Bowes system nightly, in case there's any changes to it. And then you're right, the reason we liked Pitney Bowes was we could integrate it into our checkout seamlessly. I think Pitney Bowes also might have an option where you can shoot to a generic cart, but a lot of the other guys who looked at just had where we had to go off to another cart. And it really was just an API to send the cart contents and get back the shipping rate, the duty, and the taxes, and just take those, display it, and then, like you said, when they press the order confirmation. And the last piece is when we ship. We send a shipment notification to Pitney Bowes with the tracking number, and that allows that when the package gets into the Pitney Bowes facility, they can just scan the tracking number on the barcode, on the label, and it brings up the order automatically instead of having to manually key in the Pitney Bowes order number. So we made sure the shipping transaction goes and speeds up the process through Pitney Bowes.
Here's a question for you, Scott. How do you handle currency conversions? Do you display prices in local currencies, and if so, does the customer get charged exactly what you display, even though currency may fluctuate in the following days?
Yeah, so right now everything we do is in U.S. dollars. We find a lot of the international customers are used to that, so the conversion rate is done through the credit card when it's processed. In our business, we do it in authorization, and then we capture when it's shipped. And that's one of the biggest challenges, is how do we display local currencies and then be able to capture maybe a day or two later and capture the same amount we told the customer we were going to capture. That is our challenge for 2015. We want to display in local currencies. We're looking at, there's a lot of services out there that offer be able to do conversions through an API, and then the question is, we have to save that local currency in, so that when I do the capture, I'm capturing exactly what I told the customer, not what the current day's conversion rate is. So, but we find that most people accept the U.S. dollars, and they can figure it out themselves.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions about selling on Amazon and eBay. So, Scott, do you sell internationally on Amazon and eBay, and does that do they help ease any of the complexity of selling abroad?
We do sell on Amazon, but we don't sell internationally yet. One of the things with Amazon, they've broken the world into segments. So you have a European segment, a North American, Asia, South America. And so when you list your product on Amazon, you have to put what your shipping charge is. So you put your shipping rules in there, and the shipping shows up. But you have to put in your shipping charge by region. So, and with that, they don't have any duty calculations on there. So one of the things we're looking at doing is we're going to figure out a flat rate, duty, tax, and shipping based on the regions. So we have to go to the countries that are in that region, figure out what our overhead is for a typical size package. And what will end up happening is we may make money on some orders, and we may lose money on other orders for that. It's actually a project we're undertaking right now to try to do some tests to see how well we can sell internationally on Amazon. But with their infrastructure, it's not cut and dry. You have to figure out what the shipping charge will be for each region.
Okay, here's a question. Go ahead, Craig.
I was just going to chime in on eBay. I think, as I mentioned, eBay has a global shipping program, which we actually power. So all of the functionality that Scott described for his web stores, the landed cost guarantee, all of that for 64 countries is embedded within eBay. So that's resident within their platform versus Amazon. Just wanted to draw that distinction.
Yep.
Okay, Craig, here's a question for you about security. Getting packages delivered to the customer can be a problem in some countries. Do you have any suggestions for shippers sending to those countries that are known as security risks? And after the package gets into the country, how do you get it to the consumer?
Yeah, the way we work is we work with a network of best-in-class last-mile delivery agents, and we go through a pretty strict process in terms of who we'll use in a given country, and that's allowed us to really reduce the incidence of fraud down to a very low level. And I'll give an example of a country like Russia, where we're actually getting tracking all the way through and proof of delivery. So to us, it's really around, we have SLAs around time, obviously, but we also have SLAs around tracking quality information and proof of delivery, which is key. So it hasn't really been an issue for us, but it's more because we've prevented it up front by making sure that we're working with providers who are getting the packages there, and who are making sure that the buyers are are signing for them or signing proof of delivery or POD.
As a percent of total orders, we find that we have less lost packages internationally than domestically.
A couple of questions for you, Scott, about translation. You touched on this briefly, but do you translate? Do you have any localized websites, and have you thought about working with a translation vendor?
Yeah, we actually have a website in China in Chinese, and we're working on doing integrating more of the American product onto the Chinese site to do the shipping. So we have expertise in Chinese. I speak a little Chinese myself, and we've also have the site in Spanish. But we found that the overhead for our marketing department to try to continue to do more than one language was a burden for them, and so we started looking at translation services, and the big one obviously is translations.com, and we've started researching how to integrate with them to make it easier to communicate information back and forth. Especially, like I said, we enter in thousands of new styles every season, and to get that so that we can trigger that to go to translations.com or a similar service and get the information back. That's a project we started to do research on now. And again, we don't want to spend a lot of money on it unless we know it's going to work, so we're trying to strategically pick what languages to try it in and see if we have some success. So measure how our conversions are going before and then measure after, and then be able to then invest more money into that process if it's worth it.
Next question. What if we have multiple distribution centers? Can I send merchandise overseas from each, or do I need separate systems? Craig?
Yeah, sure. Short answer is that's no problem at all. So the U.S. distribution center you're sending to can be, you can ship from any of your drop ship locations directly there. It would obviously affect your ability to consolidate shipping, as Scott mentioned before, where you're saving on domestic freight by consolidating from your dropship locations. But yeah, that's not a problem at all.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you have to keep in mind, which actually is a project I'm working on right now, is we have all our dropship come to one destination. We consolidate them into multi-unit orders before we ship it. There's a Pitney Bowes order number that gets created when you create an order on your site, and that's how you communicate back and forth with Pitney Bowes, so they know the shipping address, the shipping type, the product on there. What I'm working on now is a way maybe to have some drop ship vendors ship directly to the Pitney Bowes warehouse, but with that I need to make sure I create a separate Pitney Bowes order number for each shipment going there, because that's how they track and that's how they're able to redirect it out of their warehouse.
Okay, last question, Scott, for you. How do you verify international cards to prevent fraud so you can safely ship using the Pitney Bowes system?
It's a multi-step process we do. We use a fraud control software that I lost the top of my head what it is. But we have an API at our checkout that we run every credit card through. It's a lot. Actually, Amazon uses the same company to basically test. It fingerprints the computer, looks up that computer to see if anybody else has reported fraud from there. Looks at different characteristics. So a lot of our potential fraud orders are caught through that process. Internationally, one of the issues with international credit cards versus domestic is that they don't do address verification, the AVS checks. So, and it's just not offered. It's not like our credit card processor can't do it, but like in Europe, they don't have the concept of address or an AVS check, a zip code or an address check. So a lot of our fraud check is through the fraud software that we use, the fraud service. That really it catches whether this particular computer, this particular customer, this particular card has been reported by other online retailers as a potential fraud. And then there's other things we look at, like is the billing address and the shipping address different? Things like that we can check that highlight whether this could potentially be a fraud order. And then what we do is if we feel that it may be a fraud order, we put it on hold. And then that's where we follow up and try to contact the customer and do some other types of verifications before we release it.
And overall, the fraud rate is acceptable to you?
Yeah, like I said, we've had, I think, 2 chargeback orders, meaning that we've actually shipped it out and we found that it was a fraud order. 2 total in 3 years of doing Pitney Bowes. Okay.
Well, that takes up to our time. Thanks very much, Scott LaPointe from Planet Shoes and Craig Reed from Pitney Bowes. And thank you all for your attention and your questions. That ends today's program. This is Don Davis from 20Retailer signing off. Have a great day.